Hi there. Hello everyone. Hope all of you are doing great. Now, according to the schedule, today we're going to talk about the lexical approach. Now, before we jump into what is lexical approach, we're going to revise a little bit about lexical. What does lexical? So lexical comes from a word lexis. Maybe we actually discuss about in other subjects, in Introduction to Linguistics and under syntax subject, if you actually remember about that. So lexis or the lexical approach, moreover the lexic part is basically a combination of two words that forms into a different meaning. We will discuss more of it later in the presentation. What is the lexical approach? So lexical approach is a way of analyzing and teaching language based on the idea is made of lexical units rather than grammatical structures. The units are chunk forms by collocations. So in lexical approach is where naturally teacher will tend to teach more about how do we use collocations in speaking. And later on, students will actually follow these collocations and will naturally implement it in their daily lives. Now, going on to the theory of language and learning. So here, basically, we're just going to discuss about the kind of materials that we're going to talk or we're going to teach into the classrooms. First, as example, do my hair, do the cooking, do the laundry, do my work. Make my bed, make a promise, make coffee, and make a meal. Now, those are just like small examples of how do we use a collocation in a conversation or maybe in a sentence. As we all know, these kind of thing doesn't really have a structural things. Why we use do, why we use make, and how to distinguish it. Here is where it happens. The lexical approach here is to help the students to be more active and to be more interactive with the teachers, where the teachers really tend to use these collocations, and at the end of the day, students will not think, why do they use do or make to combine with other words, because focused into using it, people would actually say that they would be much more familiar. Take it this way. If you're watching this video, if I can actually ask you one thing, what would you think that if I say, it's time to do your bed, you would feel that it is unfamiliar and that is not right. Why do you feel that it is actually not right? Because you're used to listening. This is why the lexical approach is actually close to the natural approach. Other examples here, for example, idioms. Dead drunk, to run up the bill. Connections, finally to conclude, etc. And conversational gambits, for example, guess what? Hi there. What you up to? Now, these are the things of the examples of lexical approach that would be implemented in almost daily conversation that we really do not recognize it. Why do we actually do not recognize it? Because the teacher that we have been taught use this approach in the classroom. Now, let's go on to the teaching objectives. According to Richard, a lexical approach in language teaching refers to one derived from the belief that the building blocks of language learning and communication are not grammars, function, notion, or some other units of planning and teaching, but lexis, that is, words and word combination. What do we get from Richard here is that teachers need to understand and consolidate the learning materials that could be connected to the lexical approach. Meaning that we need to find the materials that could combine lexical approaches here into the materials. For instance, lexical approach would be much more suitable for speaking activities instead of grammars. Because in speaking activities, we won't really pay attention to the grammar and we would actually go with expressions. While in grammar, as we all know, we will actually tend to more focus on the structure sentence. Together, teacher needs to comprehend the most common lexical words with lexical patterns and accesses. Continuing to the next part is the teacher and student's role. Firstly, teachers. Teacher talk is a major source of learner input. Need to understand and manage a classroom methodology based on stage composed of task, planning, and report. Creating an environment, and teacher is not a knower but a discoverer. Continuing to the next one is student's role. Providing participation with listening, noticing, and reflecting. And lastly, the student is the discoverer. Final one, procedure. How do we actually implement this approach into our classroom? So this procedure, it could be used in common classes, but it doesn't mean that this is actually the exact or concrete way to use lexical approach. Lexical approach is also flexible, that we can actually try mix and match, try to edit it or adjust according to the situation and the classroom itself. So this, what I'm actually going to show you, is what I actually was going to do in my classroom. So first, attracting students' attention to lexical collocations by, for example, demonstrating things. Second, increasing student retention by elicit or would ask the students to repeat what I'm saying. And the third one, teaching individual collocation. It would be much more emphasizing the collocation that we're going to use or that we're going to learn on that day. Making students aware of collocations is by demonstrating the collocation that we have been learned and what kind of situation that we can use it. Extending what students already know by adding knowledge of collocation restriction to know vocabulary. Here it is much more where students would actually go pair with the others and they will try to discover about how, in what other situation that those collocation can be used. 6, storing collocation through encouraging students to keep a lexical notebook. Now here, just like what I said earlier, is optional. You can actually use this in your classroom, but it doesn't mean that this is the perfect one. I would encourage students to use a lexical notebook where they would write down some lexical phrases or lexical words that have been taught that day, and at the end of the semester or at the end of the day, they would actually submit it and we would see how do they progress on using it. And after all of this, after all of the discussion and explanation about lexical approach comes into one specific question. Is lexical approach one of the powerful approach in the classroom? Well, my answer, and perhaps every answer for every teacher, is depend. It depends on the situation of the classroom. It depends on the students that we're teaching. Lexical approach is moreover for those that are in elementary or pre-intermediate level, not a starter, because here they need to have a basic knowledge, a basic understanding, at least vocabulary. I can't use lexical approach in the first grader of elementary because they would be extremely confused what I'm saying. But if I actually use this, for example, for senior highs or even universities, they would understand more and they would comprehend it because they understand, they do have the basic knowledge with them. In my conclusion, that here, teacher will talk more, will use more language, use more English inside the classroom, meaning that it is like 80-20%, 80% English, 20% the original, let's say in this case, Indonesia. So that is why here lexical approach cannot be used for students that may have a small basic knowledge in English. Okay, maybe that is all for this presentation about lexical approach. If you have any other questions, you can actually comment below, or you can just go to WhatsApp group later and then we can actually discuss more intensively. Thank you all for your kindly attention. Hope you have a very wonderful day, week, month, year. Stay safe, stay healthy, and always stay creative.